I'm Crystal and I'm the Cottage Witch, and I don't have an intro yet, so I made this. Alright, so this is like my second or third time trying to film this video, so if it's very rushed, I apologize. But I'm trying to make it as short and as sweet as possible. Without further ado, these are the top 10 things that I wish I knew when I began my practice. Tip number 1, know your energy. I feel like there's not enough talk about energy work. Some people just jump right into spell casting. So they'll jump right into casting circles or calling the corners or working with the guardians or laying a compass, doing a cone of power, working with the 3 cauldrons. There's like a plethora of different things that you could do. But when you're working with energy, when you're trying to be in tune with all that is around you, it's a lot harder if you're not aware of your own energy to realize when you're using your energy instead of what's around you. Because when you do spell work, you're not supposed to use your own energy. It's not just coming right from you. You're calling it from the ground, you're calling it from the sky, you're calling it from the elements. Some people work in different types of practices, so they'll have different types of magical entities that they work with. Nothing scary. I know as soon as you say magical entities, someone's all like, oh, it's the bad stuff. It's not the bad stuff. But anyway, if you're not familiar with what your energy feels like or what basic forms of energy feel like to you, it's gonna be so much harder just to grasp when you're actually connecting with a spell. Energy work is like the first and foremost for me that I wish I knew beginning my practice. And there's different ways that you can practice energy work. It doesn't have to be like this crazy meditation. If that doesn't work for you, that doesn't work for everybody. What you could do is, everyone makes moon water and sun water, and people have tons of crystals. Like you can't see this table, but it's filled with crystals. But if you have anything like this, like I'm just going to use my crystal because it's right here for an example. What you can do is you can imagine energy leaking out of you, kind of like tendrils of smoke. And you put the object, you can start with it nice and close, and you can try to connect with the object and feel like what that object's energy feels like to you. So with moon water, can you tell the difference between the energy? What does that feel like to you? What does moon energy feel like to you? If you do it with sun water, what does sun water feel like to you? If you do it with like a living plant or anything like that, what does that plant energy feel like to you? Are you able to tell once you are connected to that plant, once you are connected to that energy source? It makes it a lot easier if you work with your energy from the beginning. I'm not just talking like chi balls and psi balls, though those are a great way to call power to yourself. That'll be another quick little video clip of the day kind of deal. But again, what I wish I really knew from the beginning was to work with energy first. When I started, I had to go to the reference section in the library. You could not check out books on witchcraft in the library. It was only in the reference section. And the only internet that we ended up getting in recent years was Ask Jeeves. It just shows how old I am. And I was first getting into my practice before, I found my mentors and before I went to classes and before I really got myself grounded in my craft. I just thought I had to write down every single spell that I could, and I had to study what spell work was, but not the effort that goes into it. Please do not overlook energy work. There's different forms of it for everybody. You just don't have to meditate. Tip number 2. There's a difference between clearing and cleansing. What? Right? I honestly thought they were the same exact thing when I first started. I honestly thought that, and this is not to belittle anyone who does this whatsoever, but if I was to take a candle, again, this whole table is covered with things. I know you can't really see it. Well, I'll just do a quick pan down. If I was to just light a candle, if I had a bad day, or actually incense would probably be a better example for this because most people are familiar with smoke cleansing. I had a bad day. If I just lit the incense without doing anything else, that it would take away all that bad negative energy and shoot away, and I would be completely clear, and my whole house would be amazing, or my whole room or wherever I was in that moment would be clear and clean from all bad juju feelings. I was wrong. I was so wrong. That's not how that works. And I really wish I knew that. You have to actually physically clear the energy from the space. Sometimes if that's all you have energy for, just to, to light something and say a few words, or like do salt around, or holy water, that's fine. Whatever you want to use, you can use it. But once in a while, you do have to do like a big energy clearing of your space. If it's something that kind of gathers negative energy, like if you're in an apartment building, or you live with a bunch of different people and everyone has different emotional and social batteries, so not everybody's on the same wavelength, because it's life, it happens. Or if you're like me, if you have really bad depression or anxiety, sometimes just having motivation to clean up your house takes a lot out of you, so it just feels like that heavy, stagnant energy. You have to actually physically clear out that energy before you cleanse. To clear the energy, you want to break up the energy. You just don't want to put smoke on top of it, because that'll just cleanse it, but without actually removing the issue, it's just going to make it look and smell pretty, and the issue is going to continue to come back. That's why sometimes if you cleanse, you're like, well, maybe I didn't do it right, or oh, I feel like I have to keep cleansing, it doesn't feel like the same over here. That could be a main reason why, because like I said, I honestly thought they were the same thing. One of the ways that I use to clear out my energy is I will try to physically break up the energy with sound. Take a drum, I'll take my singing bowls, I have a big hand bell that I use, like the old-fashioned town crier. I will use that. I'll open up every drawer, I'll open up every door. I will open up and spread out the clothes in my closet, so there is no room for that energy to hide anywhere. You don't want to overlook that. You want everything open, not just the windows. After I go through and push the energy out the door, I use a special broom and I sweep it all out. Maybe it's my Italian side, I don't know, but I will sweep it all out. I'll use a little floor sweep that I make out of salt and certain herbs to make sure it's safe for my cat and my floors. And then if I decide to smoke cleanse, I will go through, cleanse myself, and then cleanse the area. Tip number 3, there is more than one way to do things. So when I first started, like I said, I would be in the library 24/7. Because of my situation, I was in the library more than I was in school, and the books on witchcraft were only in the resource section. In the 90s to the very early 2000s, a lot of the books that were on witchcraft were very heavily Wiccan based, and that there's nothing wrong with Wicca. Wicca is a religion, while witchcraft is a practice. They are two completely separate things. Wicca, there are some initiation based where like Gardenian and Alexandrian and oh, there's another one, I can't remember it. There's going to be a section on that. I'll put that in there because I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to look it up. I would argue that Dianic Wicca is considered initiatory because it's female based. However, they might be adapting that to female like energy. If you identify as a female, they might be more welcoming of that, but they only went by physical female. You could only be born a female to be part of Dianic Wicca. But they might have changed that. Please don't hold them against that. I am not part of that, so I don't know if that has changed. Wicca is completely different than witchcraft. Again, Wicca is a religion, while witchcraft is a practice. It's like voodoo and hoodoo. Voodoo is a religion. Hoodoo is a practice. There's a difference. For these books, they would use Wicca and witchcraft interchangeably. So a lot of these things like casting a circle, having an altar, working with deities and whatnot, a lot of that comes from Wicca-based text, just because there was no change in between them. And again, there's nothing wrong with Wicca. It's just not a practice for everybody. Because again, that's a religion. Not all Wiccans are witches, and not all witches are Wiccans, obviously, because I'm not a Wiccan. Nothing wrong with Wicca, but you don't have to be Wiccan to be a witch. Bringing it back full circle, there's more than one way to do things. Right now, you have so many different options of finding different witchcraft paths, because again, witchcraft is a community, because it's a practice, it's a way of life. It's secular. Witchcraft in itself is secular. There's no religion tied to it. So if you see something in a book and you want to adapt to it, to change it in your own way, you can. You're not going to get in trouble. You're not going to get smited. You're not doing witchcraft wrong or anything like that, as long as it's in a practice that you can, and we will get into that in a moment. Tip number 4, never stop asking why. When I first started, everything that I read in a book, I just believed it. I never questioned it. When I would start going into stores, when I finally found some of these stores, like some people took advantage of that. Not gonna lie, I'm gonna be completely transparent with that. I just got a knock from my house, so I'm guessing that's a yes. But anyway, I'm gonna ask you why for a question right now. Do you know why a crystal has a certain property? You might know it has a certain property, but do you know why? Another one that's very popular right now, technically it's an old tradition, but it's being modernized. Do you know why you do cinnamon on the first? Do you know why it's cinnamon? Do you know why cinnamon is tied to abundance and prosperity? If you don't, I'll help you out. I'll tell you it right now, because I did ask a lot of questions. But if you didn't know the answer to any of those, that's showing that you're already doing things blindly. So, this is going to be my Crystal Explains Things hat. Be right back. I'm back! Why is cinnamon associated with prosperity? So back in ancient Egypt, they knew that cinnamon was an antiseptic. This was taken through trial and error. My cat is agreeing in the background, if you could hear her. I can't edit that out. This was an herb or a spice that was associated with vitality because of its antiseptic properties and its qualities. It also tingled the senses, it tickled the senses, if you will. It's a fiery herb. So if you had cinnamon, part of your spices, you were healthy, you had vigor, you were ready to work. And then if you were ready to work, you can bring that abundance back to your family. You can bring money back. You can make goods to supply for your family. You can continue that. Also, fire herbs are associated with prosperity, with passion, with promotion, with quick things. It's also, right, I'm going to end up going down a different tangent, how herbs have planetary correspondences and those planetary days and those planetary hours, which you could also help you in your spell work. But that's for another time. Back in the day, ancient Egyptians, they also didn't use the Gregorian, whatever calendar that we use now, they didn't use. That didn't exist yet. So ancient Egyptians actually used their calendar was based on the star Sirius. They realized that when the star Sirius had passed by, conjunct with the sun at a certain time, which was around July 5th-ish, I want to say, that the Nile would rise. And that's what they would use their calendar. But that was the time that was fruitful for them. That was the time of heightened energy, was when Sirius was in conjunction with the sun. Now, for some reason, modernization, they want to go by the calendar, but you don't have to go by the calendar. If you miss it on the first, what you could still do is you could use the full moon. You could use the new moon to bring in that abundance. You could do it on a certain day of the week. Do it on a Thursday. It's great for money work. Again, we'll get into planetary magic, planetary grids, planetary symbols, sigils, and glyphs, and all in between in another video. But now you know why cinnamon is tied to abundance. But yes, never stop asking why. Which takes me to tip number 5. Don't do things blindly. See how they tie into each other? It's semi-related, but going on a different vein. I'm only saying this because I come across things online where people have put crystals in humidifiers. Please don't put crystals in your humidifiers. Please don't put crystals in your coffee and then drink the coffee. So crystals go by the Moore's hardness scale. A lot of crystals have their coloring from poisonous minerals that are in there, like asbestos, and cyanide can be released from stones. This does not mean that your crystals are unsafe to the touch. However, when exposed to certain elements, these minerals can leak forth. I'm just putting that as a disclaimer. Until you're familiar in what you're working with, please just don't do things blindly because you saw it online. Just because it's natural does not mean it's safe. This also goes with taking herbs blindly while you're taking medications. Herbs do interact with medications, and you just can't take something blindly. There could still be side effects. This is not to deter you away from working with or using herbs. I'm gonna leave a list of herbs right here in my hands. There's a decent amount. These are the ones that I know of, that I have written down. I know I have more somewhere, but if I forget, I always forget about St. John wort. St. John's wort can actually affect blood count in individuals, as well if you're on any mood stabilizer medication. It could create very high euphoric episodes with very dangerous low episodes after as well. So these were all the herbs that interact with medications that I know of. Guaranteed there are more. Please talk to your doctor. Please just don't do things blindly. Please don't try to forage your own herbs if you don't know what you're doing. Try and take a class. There's classes all over if you're local to me. Again, I am not an expert in this. However, I have had training in foraging for herbs thanks to my family, which I am insanely lucky and grateful to have. But if you have any nurseries around you, guaranteed they will have a foraging class. If that's something that you want to get into, please just don't do things blindly. Tip number 6, you don't have to prove your practice to anyone. This is again something that I wish I knew as a kid. So when I first started, witchcraft was very still kind of underground. It wasn't popular. It wasn't really talked about. It was in TV shows, sure, but the Satanic Panic was still kind of going strong from the 80s. But because of all those TV shows and everything else that came out, it was very fictionalized in Hollywood. There was no accurate representation of what witchcraft actually was. Everyone thought it was kind of make-believe. So I went over and beyond to try and prove that what I was doing was valid, that what I was doing was real. It was a real thing, and I was a real witch. And it mattered to me. And I would fight so hard just to have people try and listen to me. I would mix science in it. I still mix science in with my witchcraft now and psychology, because I do a mixture of witchcraft and the occult, and all these practices all mixed in together that have to do with the mind and science and the earth and space, because this is all just a giant melting pot of learning, and it's beautiful. But I don't have to go and prove it to anybody. I really wish I knew that as a kid. No matter what, you don't have to prove your practice to anybody. Again, as long as you're staying in practices that you are able to work in. So there are practices that are considered to be closed. I'm going to pop them up on the screen right now. These are the ones that have been told to me by the people in the practice and other practitioners that they are currently closed at this time. These could be subject to change or subject to certain opinions of people from them, not from us who are outside of it. These other ones are closed by initiation base. So in other words, technically anyone could be part of these practices, but you have to be taught them. Like Reiki, for an example, that is on this list. Not anyone can decide, I'm gonna go do Reiki and open up their own Reiki shop. Same with Catholicism. You can decide that you want to be Catholic, but you still have to go through the process to be a Catholic. You cannot just say that you are a Catholic without doing the process. That's what this initiation base basically means. So again, anything that you're doing that does not fall in that practice, or if you are able to be initiated, I'm putting it like this because it's just a broad term that covers all those practices, into one of those. But again, you don't have to prove your practice to anyone. It's yours. Now, spirituality, witchcraft, the occult, hermeticism, esoteric and exoteric knowledge is everywhere. It's beautiful. You could walk into a room with 20 people now, and at least one of those people is a witch. Guaranteed. And if not, at least 6 of those people have spiritual beliefs or practices that they do. It is so open and common now. It's beautiful. So you don't have to prove it to anybody. Each practice is different and each practice is valid. Tip number 7. So this wasn't around when I was first starting, but if I was to start now, this is something that I would tell myself now, is stop buying into trends. Make your own decisions and your own choices. By your own feelings, not because you think it's what's expected of you. One of the trends that I see right now is deity work. I'm not exactly, well, I guess I can kind of see where it comes from because, again, a lot of things are very heavily Wiccan based, and people are talking about working with all these deities. You don't have to work with a deity. Again, witchcraft is a secular practice. There is no religion that is tied to it. It is a craft. It is a practice. Adding in a deity, you could totally do that if you want to, but especially when you're first beginning, you don't have to make a relationship with the deity. You don't have to work with different types of gods and goddesses and elementals and all of that. You're just starting. That's the newest fad now, is people are being like, oh, what deity are you working with? Who's your patron god or goddess? That is not necessary. You don't have to tie in religion with your practice. You're just starting out. Find your footing first. Find your foundation. Settle yourself into your witch's pyramid, which we'll talk about at another time. But just be and exist. Everything else will come. Same with altars. Altars right now are becoming very popular. You don't need an altar to be a witch. You definitely don't need one. It's another thing that I see everywhere is everyone's like, let me see your altars. I need to see your altar space. That's not needed. So an altar, in most cases, and definitely not all, but in most cases, again, is the place for the worship. So you'll have a chalice that represents the goddess or the feminine. And then you'll have your athame, which represents the male and the masculine, which has both duality and god and goddess attributes. You don't need to have that. If you want to have an area to do your magical workings, like your little safe area, that's totally fine. You could have that. Because all your workings are going to be different. You're not always going to be doing the same spells over and over again. If you wanted to work with deities, for an example, just use them as psychological constructs. Use the energy that they symbolize. Deity that her day is on my birthday is Bridget. So she's goddess of the hearth and of blacksmithing. She's fiery. If I wanted to work with her, but say if I didn't believe in her as a goddess that exists currently at this time, I can use that energy that she stands for. That fiery, powerful energy of independence for what she stands for, and I could use that in my spells. Same if I was going to war, I could use the Morrigan for an example. That energy of what she stands for, I could use that as a psychological construct. I don't have to actually work with the physical deity. While we're talking about trends, I'm also just gonna say, there's a lot of spell jar stuff going on. Spell jars are containment jars. They're normally used for scapegoat spells. That's what witches' balls were originally started as, were in jars. They originally were because they're scapegoat spells, they're containment spells. Not every spell has to go into a jar, and most definitely a lot of spells should not go in jars. I'm just saying that. There is a lot more to which my house just knocked like multiple times. Did you hear that? Nolan's here, sorry. House is agreeing with me. Not every spell has to go into jars, and not all spells should go in jars. There's more to witchcraft than candles, herbs, and jar spells. There's so much more. Please remember that. Please know that. Please. Tip number 8. Wording is important. Again, this is something that I kind of knew going into the craft, but not as much to a certain extent. I knew for my manifestations, I would have to write it in the present tense. Like, instead of, I don't want a bad day, I would be right, I am having an amazing day. And I would hold on to that feeling. I knew about that type for the manifestation, and that you have to feel it. That's part of the manifestation. You can't just write it 3, 6, and 9 times. You can't write it in petition and sign it like a check. You have to actually feel it to help, put out that energy. I would do something the complete opposite like that for my spell work. Again, I'm a person that suffers from extreme anxiety, especially social anxiety. If you ever see me in public, you know I'll either talk a lot or I try to make sure everybody else is comfortable so I don't have to focus on how uncomfortable I am. I would do anti-anxiety spells. That is so counterproductive. When you're trying to work on something to nix something out of your vocabulary, you don't want the cause of the problem in there. The cause of the problem is anxiety. Instead of being anti-anxiety, it should have been calming spells. This is a calming spell. This is a calming tea. Instead of this is an anti-anxiety spell, this is an anti-anxiety tea. Certain words need to be completely removed, even if you're labeling your spell jars. I still have an old spell jar. I keep all my herbs literally in the same exact spot for their energy because, again, planetary energy with herbs, and I just refill them. They always stay in the same spots on my shelves, and then I just refill them when I work with them. And I still have one that says anti-anxiety as my lesson to remember. And I won't get rid of it. I won't get rid of it. So I'll always remember the importance of words even when I negative self-talk, because we all have those days. Tip number 9. Your practice will change. It'll change 1,000 times over and over and over again. And that's fine. That's perfectly normal. Your practice is going to change as much as you change. In the beginning, like I said, which was over 20 something years ago, oh my freaking gosh, a lot of my stuff was primarily Wiccan based. So I did a full year and a day study. I studied everything I could about witchcraft for a year and a day before my first spell was my self-dedication ritual. And that was Wicca. So in my first few years of my practice, I was a solitary Wiccan that would, meet up with other Wiccans at different shops and other places around before I realized that, this isn't really me. But before I found my mentors and before I was going to my classes under different witches and different magical practitioners all throughout New England, I was primarily Wiccan, and it just never really sat right with me. Your practice is always going to change as much as you change, and you're always changing, you're always evolving, and your practice is going to change with that too. There's nothing wrong with that. It's totally normal, and it's totally fine. It doesn't make you any less of a witch, and we're always learning. This is a community. Don't be ashamed if your practice is completely changed, and you're definitely not the same witch, because that's normal. Tip number 10, my favorite tip that I really wish I knew when I was beginning, is to make your own magical loophole in your spellwork. I know that one's actually like a witchy tip instead of a support tip, but seriously. So in the beginning, when you first do your spells, you will mess up. That's normal. I'm not jinxing you. I'm not doing anything like that. It's gonna happen. It's not gonna be 100% each time that you do a spell, and it's totally normal and it's totally fine if a spell doesn't work or if it doesn't work the way that you thought it did. Instead of trying to reverse everything that you did or using mirror shards to break apart the spell or dismantling everything and saying everything in reverse, if you make your own magical loophole in your spells, you can undo anything that you mess up. And not only that, if you want your spell to continue to keep going, no one else can undo your spell. Unless they do the magical gesture that you use for it. You could use a type of conjure gesture. There's all different types. Not mudras. You don't want to use mudras in Wicca, because that's a different practice. You can make your own conjure symbol. You can use your own phrase. You could use a certain herb. You could use a certain candle to be activated with it, like a certain sigil or anything. The possibilities are completely endless. And that way someone's all like, well, I'm just going to undo or send back anything that they sent to them. Technically you can't, because one, it's anchored in a loop, and the only person that can technically undo the spell is you yourself. And it's a great learning opportunity. Once I kind of figured out that I could do that, I was like, oh, are you serious? Make your own magical loopholes in your spellwork. Do it. Do it now. A phrase that only you would think of, an herb that only you would think of. Make sure it's something obscure that someone's not going to automatically think and associate with you. That's like the best spell tip. It may not seem like it, but it seriously is. Alright, I really hope you enjoyed my 10 tips that I wish I knew as a beginner. I figured it'd be easier for me trying to talk to myself as a beginner and what I wish I knew versus trying to tell you how to do your practice, because it's going to be completely different. I was going to start with different foundations of magic properties and principles, but I don't know where everybody is at their practice, so I just don't want to be dropping off of like, this is how we get stuck in the astral realm, where we lay a compass and you're not actually stuck. That just sounded so bad. It's not like that at all, I promise. Again, that's a whole other conversation for a whole other day. If you have any ideas or tips or topics that you want to talk to me about or have me talk about, if I know them, I will talk about them. I am a lot easier if someone gives me a topic that is too much just kind of swimming around in here. But I would love to know what you wish you knew as a beginner or any questions that you have now if you're still beginning in your practice. We're always learning. We're always going to be students in this. There's never going to be a complete expert that knows everything in this practice. I hope you have an amazing day. Thanks for checking in and for watching this. I don't have an outro yet, but I'll think of one. Have a great day.